Heisman lines, SEC power rankings, and a Heisman rundown. It's college football smothered and covered, and we are powered by the Locked On Podcast Network.
You are Locked On College Football, smothered and covered, with your host, Barrett Sallee. Your one-stop shop for everything college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. Thank you for making college football smothered and covered your first listen every day. We are free wherever you get your podcasts and, of course, on YouTube as well. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, brought to you by our good friends at 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your first order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. That's the number 5hourenergy.com. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB. So we have a fun show today. It's Monday. It's a Monday morning quarterback edition of the show, which means we go through some big headlines that maybe we did not discuss on the Saturday show. And first things first, we are going to talk about the Heisman. Now, I know you can sit here and say, "Oh, it's Jaxson Dart. Oh, it's Carson Beck or whatever." Okay, fine. I get that. Those guys would probably be Heisman frontrunners for me too, especially Quinn Ewers. However, we got to talk about some dudes who maybe flew under the radar a little bit this week after people got caught up in the Colorado-Nebraska game and what happened with Notre Dame and, you know, the performance by Quinn Ewers. So we are going to talk a little bit about Jaxson Dart. At Ole Miss, they're supposed to put up video game numbers. That's what Lane does. So it's not necessarily surprising that you have a guy in Jaxson Dart who is putting up video game numbers. 87%. Jaxson Dart is completing 87% of his passes. I don't even do that on the video game in rookie mode. That is unbelievable against air, much less a team that has 11 players on defense. 14.7 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, no picks, 397.5 yards. Oh, and he also runs. What Jaxson Dart is doing is way under the radar. Now, it's odd to me because Ole Miss is one of those teams that people actually should be watching, and it doesn't seem like they do. I go on a lot of national radio shows, and I do my Sirius XM show. I was on 11 Alive here in Atlanta on TV last night, and we talked a little bit about this on TV. It's like Jaxson Dart, in reality, should be the Heisman frontrunner. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt, and yet we can sit here and talk about, oh, he hadn't played anybody. Okay, fine. 87.5% of his passes? I don't care if you played air. That's really darn good. The next guy, Cam Ward, flew under the radar again this weekend, and that's okay. That's okay to me. You know, he's kind of like a diet version of Jaxson Dart so far this year. He's got a big win over Florida. Everybody watched that, and you know, a lot of us were surprised that he was able to look like a quarterback who's ready for the next level, because I thought he was a stat monster. I did not think he was capable of playing that way, but it was Florida. Still, just over 75% of his passes, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, and 344 yards per game. On a team in Miami, and this is what's interesting to me, and you can kind of say the same thing about Jaxson Dart. Don't we want fresh blood Don't we want new teams? Don't we want something different than Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, whatever, Georgia? The answer is yes. And so when the playoff expanded, there was a lot of talk of, well, look at the underdog, the group of 5 teams going to spring an upset. And I kept thinking to myself, that's not why people are going to like it. I like the 4 team. I like the 2 team, whatever. But the casual fan isn't going to like it because, let's say, Memphis goes on a run. They're going to like it because historical power like Miami gets in and does some damage. An upstart in a big conference like Ole Miss gets in and does damage. A Penn State, for example. That's going to draw in the casual sports fan. That's going to draw in eyeballs. And that's exactly what Cam Ward has done already at Miami. And the schedule sets up for him to make a run. And I'm a voter for the Heisman. When I'm factoring in who I vote for, generally speaking, it's, okay, how valuable are you to the team? Cam Ward checks that box. Do you put up video game stats? Cam Ward has always checked that box. And what do you lead your team to in terms of overall success? The playoff is it for Miami. That's out there. So Cam Ward definitely, like, honestly, if I'm voting right now, Cam Ward's on my ballot of 3. We get to vote for 3 guys. Cam's on that ballot. Miller Moss does not have the touchdowns that sort of jump off the page. 2 touchdowns, no picks. He's only averaging just over 300 yards. We're going to go on in the season, and we're going to notice that the win over LSU is much more impressive than maybe we thought at the time. And I said this on the Monday show last week, that it wasn't a case of LSU being overrated. It was a case of USC being a complete football team, being a national championship contender, being a behemoth in the Big Ten. And so Miller Moss had his day. Miller Moss and showed that he can be what a lot of people maybe assumed that he could be. And that's brought USC in the top 10. That's brought USC back into the national spotlight in a good way, not in a joking, let's all pile on the Trojans way. So when USC, as the season progresses, USC's schedule is very tough. If Miller Moss can do it again, traditional power, been on the downside a little bit, might lead to the team to the playoff. All those things we just said about Cam Ward are applicable to Miller Moss as well. We will take a break. Coming up, we will talk about SEC power rankings, put them up on the X machine yesterday. I don't necessarily think a lot of folks were in disagreement of a lot of where these teams are. I'm going to justify a little bit what my mindset is on my SEC power rankings coming up next. You are listening to College Football. You are watching College Football Smothered and Covered. And of course, we are brought to you by the Locked On College Sports Network. The show brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Hey, you know what? You got to tackle a to-do list, right? You got to watch college football on Saturdays. That means you got to get stuff done around the house, the honey-do list, whatever. 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you have a long list of work, DIY projects to tackle at home, take 5 Hour Energy shot. You can check everything off your list. You know what? My honey-do list is pretty big. The house is a wreck. Hope my wife's not watching this because she's going to get mad at me for saying that. But the house is a wreck. Dog toys all over the backyard. I got a lot to do this week. Because let's be honest, during the week, I get to take a little bit of a day off. So I use 5 Hour Energy to get the job done. When you get supplies for the project, do not forget the most essential one. And that is, of course, 5 Hour Energy. With zero sugar, convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape berry, and more. The flavor, it's there for everyone. You should try every single one. On the site, you have the option to build your own 12 or 24 pack. You can choose the flavors, and they are delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. You can receive 20% off your order. That's 20% off your order by using the promo code LOCKEDONCFB. This offer is only valid till September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription offers. Go to 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5hourenergy.com. Do it today. You will not regret it. All right, so let's talk about SEC Power Rankings. Always fun. These generally exist just to make people mad, which is fun for me. Because, hey, passion is what drives college football. And this passion is there. All right, Texas over Georgia. Well, I know you can say, well, it was just because Michigan's overrated. Blah, blah, blah. No, well, Texas, in terms of power rankings, they've had a better year than Georgia. The defense, it's a complete football team, stout on both lines of scrimmage, can run the dang ball with Jaden Blue or whoever else you got to throw out there because of all the injuries. Not a problem. To me, that shows that Sark has built this team like an SEC power. So that's good. And then Texas has been above Georgia for me all year long. It's not a knock against Georgia. I just think Texas is a more complete football team right now and has the biggest win of the season. So if it has the biggest win of the season, how can you not put them number one? Right now, I think they're equal to Georgia in terms of where they can go, and they've got a better win. It's really not that difficult. I moved Tennessee over Alabama this week, and I don't think there's an argument to be made against that decision. And the reason I say that is, we talked about, I'm not the biggest Grayson McCall guy. I don't think NC State's offense is what a lot of people assumed it would be, because Grayson McCall to me is too streaky. And we talked about this all week on last week's show. I told you that Tennessee was the easiest bet of the week. You saw it come to fruition. But here's the thing. Nico Iamaleava had his C-plus game. He didn't really do anything. Threw 2 touchdowns, threw 2 picks. Didn't really have anything stellar to hang his hat on. But Dylan Sampson is a flat-out monster. And good God almighty, that Tennessee front seven is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And the one issue going into the season, which was the secondary, especially after a couple injuries in fall camp, doesn't seem like an issue. Now, pressure up front helps, of course. But are there cracks? Are there holes on Tennessee's resume, on its team? No, there's not. In fact, I was on Sports 560 in Memphis earlier today, and Greg Gaston and Eli Savoy asked me, why do you have Tennessee behind Ole Miss? And the reason is I trust Jaxson Dart more than Nico Iamaleava. And that's not a slight against Nico. He just hadn't done it for very long. Jaxson has. So I think the gap between Tennessee and Alabama is pretty significant because Tennessee hasn't shown any cracks. Alabama has, specifically from a penalty perspective. All right. South Carolina moves up to number 9. I don't really see any argument there after what that defense did. Now, I was floored. I thought it would be completely opposite. I thought South Carolina would go up to Kentucky and get absolutely worked. They out-physicaled Kentucky. They won the line of scrimmage against Kentucky. Think about that for a second. South Carolina, which has had its moments, but is not really known as a team that's going to win battles in the trenches, up against a Mark Stoops team where that's their calling card. That's what they do. South Carolina didn't care. I was floored, and it 100% justifies putting South Carolina at number 9. In fact, I thought about putting them number 8 above Oklahoma because, good God, Oklahoma can't run the football. And Jackson Arnold seems to be reluctant to stretch the field. I think honestly, if you want to say, hey, South Carolina should be above Oklahoma, fine. 100% fine. You have a great case. You have a great case. Florida. I was really close to moving Florida up to 15 and Mississippi State down to 16 because losing to Arizona State at Arizona State is still bad. That's not acceptable. But I need to see Florida with DJ Lagway against a team with the pulse. That's it. I need to see Florida with DJ Lagway against a team with the pulse. Or just simply find out what Billy Napier is going to do at his quarterback position when Graham Mertz is healthy. I think he has to go with DJ for personal reasons. He understands, hey, he's got to sell himself to the brass at Florida. How do you do that? What's the best way to do that? It's to point at DJ Lagway and say, that's my dude. That's the future of the program. And if you fire me, he's gone too. So, yes, that's what Billy needs to do. I need to see him do that. And I need to see him do that with Lagway against a team with the pulse so we see what Lagway actually is. So I didn't move Florida. Is that fair? Still, Mississippi State loss to Arizona State was absolutely brutal. But Florida's still the cellar dweller in the SEC. I don't think that will change. I love DJ Lagway. I just think he's going to make some bad mistakes against good defenses, and not a whole lot will change because of it. Coming up, early lines are out. What are the surprises? Where is Vegas wrong? Where is Vegas right? Not saying you should bet on these games, but it is interesting to see what the odds makers are looking at. You're listening to College Football Smothered and Covered, and of course, we are powered by Locked On. Hey, you know what? Show brought to you by Ibotta. IBOTTA. You know what? You're probably going to look for a vacation. Maybe go out of town to a game. Maybe rent a cabin up in the Smoky Mountains if you're a Tennessee fan. You know what? You need to look at Ibotta because you don't have to choose between where you want to go. It's there on the Ibotta app. No matter where you're going, if you want to get some hot dogs, you can get burgers to cook out before your tail, whatever. Use Ibotta. It's a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn hundreds on items, groceries, beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating that inflation. And there is a lot of that right now, no matter where you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That can cover an entire shopping trip, the flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't really amount to much. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw from your bank account, PayPal, gift cards, whatever you want. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is there for you. There's over 2,400 different brands from thousands of retailers and ones that you know, like Best Buy, Sephora, Lowe's, Macy's, all of them. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta. Just try it. You get $5 by using the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That is Locked On College when you register. Just go to the App Store, Google Play, or wherever you get your apps. Type in Ibotta. That's IBOTTA, and you can start earning cash back. Of course, use that promo code Locked On College. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, at the Google Play or App Store, and use promo code Locked On College. All right, early lines. Early lines. There are a few we're going to go over. 4, in fact, that I think are quite interesting. First things first, we're going to talk about LSU at South Carolina. South Carolina, obviously, people are pumped after what they did against Kentucky. And of course, game day is going to be there. South Carolina fans are going to be wild. And when you get South Carolina fans wild, that is dangerous. That is one of the most dangerous places to play. If you have not been to the Willie B, you need to go. You will have a great time, especially if you can find people in one of those cabooses. So, does that matter? LSU is a touchdown favorite. That is surprising to me because I think there's a sentiment out there that LSU is overrated after what happened in Las Vegas. And really, the game against Nichols last week wasn't exactly crisp. I mean, the score doesn't really indicate that, but it was not a crisp football game. To be a touchdown road favorite in one of the most hostile environments in the country, and yes, that's exactly what South Carolina is when it's cranked up. That's especially after what South Carolina did. South Carolina had doubters. I was one of them. But this is, I'm surprised that people haven't caught on or haven't reacted to that Kentucky game in a way that I think bettors should. LSU -7 it's one of those where it's almost like they want you to do it. They want you to take South Carolina. Those are always tricky to me. Those are always those lines where it's like, I might want to stay away from that one. Speaking of staying away, Alabama is a 15.5-point favorite at Wisconsin, at Camp Randall. After what we saw Alabama do or what they didn't do against South Florida, they're laying 15.5 at, again, one of the most hostile environments in the country. And I know Tyler Van Dyke, Wisconsin's quarterback, and people haven't really, been impressed with him. He's actually had a pretty good season so far. But the biggest thing to me is discipline with Alabama. The penalties were awful against South Florida. Sloppiness with the ball, 3 fumbles. Those are things when you're at home against a lesser opponent you're concerned about. And now you're going to go to Camp Randall and have success? I'd love to know how odds makers think that, why they think that. And I'm going to tell you a little story. When I was at CBS, I went to Vegas on a trip to go to the William Hill corporate headquarters. William Hill is a sports book. It got bought by Caesars, but it was one of the sports book of records. And my job was to write a story about how prop bet lines were made. And I flew out there before the NFC and AFC championship games, watched those, and then went to the headquarters on Monday morning to see how Super Bowl prop bets are made. And it's really fascinating because these guys are, you think us or yourself or whoever are sports freaks, these guys are in like encyclopedias and they spit out these prop bets like that, 5-second conversations. And the weird thing is all of them are close to each other. All these sports book, like they all are within a half point or a half yard of each other. And so when early lines come out, my mind goes back to that because I've seen it happen. I've seen the spreads come out, and not just the prop bets, but the spreads from that meeting I had. And I'm like, they settled on 15.5? How? If you're going to be sloppy with the football, if you're going to be sloppy in terms of penalties, at home against South Florida, what's going to happen in Camp Randall? 15.5 points, man. This is not, I'm not supposed to give you unsolicited betting advice. That is a lot of points. That is a lot of points. Speaking of a lot of points, Oregon's a 14-point favorite against Oregon State in Corvallis in what will be one of the most interesting games of the year because that's a pissed off Oregon State team. That is a pissed off Oregon. The Pac-2, both of those teams have just been laying wood on teams. And Oregon's pretty bad up front, which is so weird to say. We talked about this on College Sports Sunday, myself and Tom Luganbill on SiriusXM. Since when is Oregon weak on the line of scrimmage? When does Oregon get pushed around? Oregon's getting pushed around by Idaho and Boise State. Now, you can excuse Boise State because their running game is just next level, but Idaho, not so much. When you do it twice in a row between games 1 and game 2, that's a problem because there's the old adage, you improve most from game 1 to game 2. Oregon didn't. They didn't. And so now they're going up against a pissed off Oregon State team in Corvallis against a defense that just been a shutout. 14 points, 2 touchdowns. I wouldn't lay 14 points on with Oregon against anybody in FBS right now, much less a pissed off state rival that got left behind and is doing everything it can to maintain relevance in this college football world. And then Notre Dame minus 12.5 at Purdue. I was so fascinated to see what would happen with Notre Dame with these odds because 12.5, it's hard to imagine a situation where Notre Dame will score enough to cover that spread because the defense will give up a touchdown and give up 10 points. Purdue's not great, but whatever. Hudson Card is there and he's been around, so he knows how to do some things. Riley Leonard's been a complete disappointment. The offensive line sucks. They can't stretch the field. And for whatever reason, the coaching offensively with Mike Denbrock, Jeremiah Love disappeared in the second half. Like, why? Why did this happen? Why does this happen? And that's 2 straight games. One against a pretty good Texas A&M defense and one against a Northern Illinois team that, again, won the battle at the line of scrimmage. Why are they 12.5 point favorites at Purdue? I know Purdue's not a difficult place to play, but and Notre Dame will clearly be overmatched, or Purdue will be clearly overmatched from a talent perspective. Did that matter against Northern Illinois? No. You lose the battle at the line of scrimmage, and you have unbelievably horrible offensive play calling, and you have subpar quarterback play. You're in a tough place. So 12.5 points to me, I was floored when I saw this. Floored when I saw that Purdue was a 12.5 point home underdog. The home thing doesn't really matter all that much again because it's not raucous, but still, man, that's a tough one. One comment before we head out, Mr. Skeptical, SEC ain't that good again. What's that good? You know, that when we talk about SEC, Big Ten, power rankings, conferences, all that other stuff, I'd love to know in relation to what. Because if we're talking about the SEC in comparison to the Big Ten, make me a case. Make a case that the Big Ten's better than the ACC, better than the Big 12. I don't care, but you can't sit here and say Team X, and this just goes for teams too. Team X, Conference X, Player X overrated when you're not comparing them to something else. So I used to write the instant reaction piece before I left CBS to the college football playoff rankings, and I did the overrated and underrated. And that was something I always made a point to do, is say in relation to who, because we can sit here and say Oregon's overrated, and they are. And I'll say they're overrated essentially ahead of 4 or 5 teams. But if you sit here and say Alabama's overrated compared to who? Who would you put ahead of them? I don't think you put anybody ahead of the SEC right now. That's just me. Especially considering an SEC team just whipped one of the supposed powers of the Big Ten, a team that won a national championship last year. So that will do it for this edition of College Football Smothered, powered by the Locked On Podcast Network. Hey, thank you for making us your first listen. For your second listen, go check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. Of course, does a great job covering the entire world of college football as well. You can find it on the Locked On College Football Network, or just go to the link below. Description below. It'll be there. Don't forget to set up notifications for that show as well as this show. And look, if you like college football, the shows on Locked On, the podcast network, just tremendous. Tremendous. This is a new media world. There is no place better to find fantastic content than the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Until Tuesday, have a good one.